Metroid is one of Nintendo's best series, and yet it's one of its least used. And that's sad. And Texas and video over. Of course I'm kidding, I need that watch time. I think Metroid may be Nintendo's coolest series, like from an idea standpoint. It's got the action puzzle aspect of Zelda, but being alone on a desolate planet and eventually uncovering its secrets is probably cooler than Zelda's, swords and, grass. Yeah, definitely cooler than grass. And don't get it twisted now, I think Zelda might be more fun to play, but I think Metroid is a cooler concept. Notice the distinction. This whole Zelda comparison really doesn't have much to do with the video, I just got carried away. The point is, Metroid is one of Nintendo's best series, right up there with Mario and Zelda, and yet we get far fewer Metroid games than those other two, and it seems to struggle to get the sales the other two games do too. And I think Metroid deserves better. Hello all 2,450 of you, I'm Redkwan, and this is the Sad State of Metroid. So where do we even begin? Skipping the N64 and Wii U, getting delayed on the Switch, the sales struggles, these. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Metroid is a dead series. Nintendo definitely has some dead series, and Metroid is not nearly as bad off as they are. But for such a well-received series, and one that's been around for so long and is so much a part of Nintendo, all of it seems a bit strange. I guess the best place to start is probably with the infrequent game releases. Metroid skipped the N64 and the Wii U, and it seems like it's going to be taking a while to come out on the Switch as well, now that it's been delayed and all. I don't know exactly what the problem is here, but clearly Nintendo doesn't think Metroid is a series that needs to happen on every one of their consoles, which is pretty strange actually, when pretty much every Nintendo series that's at least decently sized gets an entry on every console. Obviously Mario and Zelda and Mario Kart and Super Smash Bros. Do, but you also have games like Donkey Kong, Mario Party, Paper Mario, Yoshi, Kirby, and such that also get a console entry pretty much every time. The only ones that really don't have that are either the pretty darn small series or the newer series that have only been around since the GameCube or Wii. Metroid doesn't fit into either of those groups, being around since the NES, as well as being a series that sells alright, although obviously it isn't one of the biggest series out there. I think what it might come down to is that although the games haven't sold terribly in the past, they take a whole lot of work compared to the other games that sell in that level. Metroid, like I mentioned earlier, is a series that's almost Zelda-like in terms of ambition, and yet the games haven't had nearly that level of result. If it was a 2D platformer or a party game or something like that, the sales would be just fine, but as a full 3D adventure game, it's probably not as big of a success. And it doesn't help that when Nintendo has tried anything new with the games, like with Other M and Federation Force, fans haven't liked the result. Part of that could just be that people want a Metroid Prime game instead of a spin-off, but at the same time, I think both of these games misunderstood what fans wanted from Metroid to begin with. Metroid can't seem to find success in its current form, and Nintendo can't change its current form because when they've tried that, it hasn't really panned out. And because Metroid takes a whole lot of development work and the sales don't seem to reflect that, it leaves Metroid in a bad spot. It's one of Nintendo's biggest and best series, but it's usually not the best one for Nintendo to be making, and getting fewer games is the result. So what's the fix? If Metroid is in this sad state of Texas, how can it pull itself out? Well, to be honest, I think a big part of the problem is that the series just isn't Nintendo-y enough. There are plenty of games that go for a similar idea as Metroid, with the exception being that Metroid does it in a much more interesting way, and usually at a higher quality, and a lot of these games actually do very well. There are plenty of Nintendo games that do well too, like Zelda for example, and that's just a game about grass. I think the problem is that Metroid, while it's very good, and while games like it do very well on other systems, isn't exactly the right type of game to succeed on most Nintendo systems. Most Nintendo series are fairly approachable looking, but Metroid is a lot darker, and I would guess a large portion of Nintendo's audience just wasn't interested in a game like this, especially on somewhere like the Wii, and on the GameCube it was the system that just didn't sell well enough for the games to do anything special. Metroid games have almost always been released near the end of a system's life, which usually hurts sales because there are usually so many other games out at that point that you can play pretty much anything else instead. So that also doesn't help matters. But is there really any way out of this? Well, that's where I think there's some good news as well as some more bad news. The original Metroid Prime on the GameCube actually sold decently well, which makes me think if given a big enough group that's the right type of audience for Metroid, Metroid could actually be a really popular series. And I think if there was one big game like that, because of how good Metroid is, Metroid could really solidify a much bigger fan base, and we could get games in the series much more often. And based on the types of games Switch owners have been buying, and the initial response to the Metroid Prime 4 reveal, I think the Switch could finally be that place. The Switch has a lot of people, and a lot of people who would be interested in a Metroid Prime game. And if Metroid Prime 4 launched right now, I think it would do way better than the other Metroid Prime games. If its initial development went well, Metroid could have finally become a successful series. I really do think that. But that development didn't go well, and Metroid Prime 4 was completely restarted, which means it probably isn't coming for a very long time. And I think that means that once again, Metroid is going to come out near the end of a system's lifetime, not sell too terribly well, or at least not nearly as well as it would have if it released earlier, and then we'll be waiting for another 10 years for a new Metroid Prime game. Again. And this series will have missed its best chance to become one of Nintendo's most popular series, and it may never get this good of an opportunity again. Man, I'm really piling it on. And you're dumb, and you stink, and you don't have any friends. Got 'em. Well, I'm Redkwan. Are you excited for Metroid Prime 4? In 2023? Do you think there's any chance Metroid finally makes it big, or do you think there's some legitimate reason why it hasn't been terribly popular? Was the Texas thing funny, like, at all? Because if not, I'm sorry, but I had to throw it in there, because I've been waiting to use that line for like a year, and now I finally have. Well, because Texas is a state, you know. Anyways, I'm Redkwan, thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all later. Goodbye.